If you're hearing this, it means someone found my field recorder near Station 12. Don't send it back to headquarters. Don't catalog it. Just listen. Then decide if you still want to work these parks after dark. They call the Badlands empty. They say the space out here swallows sound, that the wind just loops around the same ridges until it forgets what it was carrying. That's not true. The wind remembers everything. I've been a ranger 21 years. Most nights were quiet ones, coyotes yipping at the horizon, wind tapping at loose siding, the occasional tourist lost on a trail. But some nights, the quiet gets personal. It was the autumn of '99, a drought year. Fires had taken half the northern section, so they rotated staff to cover remote posts while repairs went on. I drew Station 12. 1 week alone. Routine supply checks, weather readings, log updates, easy duty. The drive out took 3 hours from the nearest town. The dirt road was so dry it cracked under the tires like thin ice. When the station finally came into view, a squat building slouched between ridges, it looked like it was trying to sink back into the earth. Inside smelled of dust, iron, and something old and wet hiding in the wood. There were 3 rooms, a tiny office, a bunk room, and a storage closet that never closed right. I signed the logbook, flipped through old entries, and stopped when I saw the last page. The handwriting curved downward, frantic but controlled, like someone writing while the table shook. The last line read, "Don't follow the voice." I laughed, out loud. Told myself it was some ranger joke. People get cabin fever out here, scribble nonsense to spook the next poor soul. I even wrote, "Nice try, Howard," in the margin. By dusk, I'd unpacked, brewed stale coffee, and sat by the shortwave radio. The static filled the space like warm water filling a tub. Steady, almost comforting. The routine was muscle memory. Report coordinates, confirm weather, log temperature, nothing strange. Until the static changed. It started soft, a gap between the noise, like breath slipping under the sound. Then a shape formed in it. A word. My name. "Nate!" I froze, cup halfway to my mouth. Said the same thing every ranger says when the woods start playing tricks. Wind in the wire, that's all. But the voice came again, right on the edge of hearing, half static, half something human. "Nate! Come on!" The air inside the station went thin. I turned down the volume, but the voice stayed, softer now, behind me. The front door shifted open an inch. The wind outside wasn't strong enough to move it, not that heavy wood. I told myself the latch hadn't caught. I told myself a lot of things in those first few minutes. I stepped out with my flashlight. The prairie was a sheet of steel under the moon. No trees close enough to hide behind, just low brush and miles of dry ridges. Then, near the bottom of the draw, I saw a flicker of light, like someone swinging a lantern. It swayed once, twice, then went out. Could have been another ranger, could have been a poacher, could have been heat lightning behind the hills. I radioed. "Station 12, possible light near creek bed, investigating." Static answered. No voice. The silence pressed in until my own breathing sounded foreign. I started toward the slope, half mad with the need to prove it was nothing. Halfway down, I stopped. The wind carried a sound that didn't belong to any animal I know. Not a coyote, not an owl. It was language, but stretched thin, like someone trying to remember how to form a word. It said my name again, drawn out, smiling through its teeth. Nate. Every instinct screamed to turn back, so I did. Climbed the hill fast, boots slipping in loose dirt. When I reached the door, the light from inside cut a strange angle across the ground. The door was open wider than before. Inside, muddy footprints dotted the floor, bare feet, human-sized, water pooled at each heel. They led from the door to my bunk and stopped. No prints returning to the door. I stood there listening to my own pulse thud against my eardrums. Every board in that building groaned in rhythm with it, like the place was breathing me in. Not real. Real. Not real. I said it under my breath the way a priest might say a prayer, locked the door, turned the radio off, sat on the bunk until the edges of the dark stopped moving. Sometime after midnight, I heard paper shifting, the logbook opening on its own. I told myself it was the draft. Then came the whisper again, inches from my ear. You followed it. I grabbed the pencil, hands shaking, and wrote what I could. Unidentified voice over radio. Possible interference. Investigate in morning. That's what the report will say if anyone ever reads it. But the truth, that first night, the voice didn't come from the radio. It came through it, the way breath fogs glass. I lay back on the bunk and listened to the wind trying on my name again and again until it fit. Morning found me sitting upright, coffee gone cold, radio silent, like it had never breathed a word. The footprints were still there, dry now, flaking into powder when the sun came through the window. I stared at them for a long time, waiting for them to make sense. I told myself I'd been half asleep, that the mind invents things to fill the space between one heartbeat and the next. Rangers spend too much time alone. Solitude starts painting faces on shadows. That's what I said out loud. Saying it made it sound true. The day was clear, sharp-edged, too bright to belong to the same world as last night. I logged the temperature, checked the generator, scanned the ridges through binoculars. Routine is armor out here. You do the list, you trust the list, and nothing touches you. Station 12 sat miles from the main ranger base, tucked between dry creek beds and old cattle fences left to rot. The nearest sign of life was a fire tower to the north, but the line of sight broke behind the bluffs. If something went wrong out here, help would take hours. I flipped through the previous logs again. Ranger Howard had written for 6 straight weeks before me. His notes started normal, maintenance, weather, a bear sighting. Then small things crept in. Heard crying near creek bed. Wind said my name again. Don't follow the voice. The repetition unsettled me. Not the words themselves, but the way his handwriting grew more desperate, letters leaning forward as if running downhill. On the final page, he'd switched pencils 3 times, the lead pressing deeper each line. And after that, nothing. No report, no transfer, no exit note. They said Howard quit, drove off one morning and never came back. But Rangers talk. Some say they found his truck at a gas station 3 towns over, engine running, keys still in. Others say the truck was empty, door open. No tracks past the pavement. By noon, the wind started again, scraping the windows like fingernails over glass. I stepped outside to feel the air, dry and electric, the kind that prickles the back of your neck. The prairie stretched forever, 1,000 shades of brown and gold shifting under the light. Beautiful in a cruel way. The horizon out here does something to your sense of scale. You think you're seeing miles, but you're really staring at the same stretch of land folding itself over and over. There's nowhere to hide, but it still feels like something's hiding. I walked the perimeter, checked the fuel tanks and the old well pump. The wind carried whispers through the fence posts, tones, but no words. When it gusted, they almost formed syllables, then fell apart again. In the dirt near the back of the station, I found something half buried, a metal tag, the kind we wear clipped to our belts. I brushed it off. Howard L. The letters were scratched deep, the edges bent like teeth marks. Back inside, the air felt thicker, as if the station had been holding its breath while I was gone. I hung Howard's tag on a nail by the logbook, maybe out of respect. Maybe as proof I wasn't alone. Hours passed slow. Sunlight crawled from window to wall to floor. Each shadow that moved looked deliberate, like it was waiting to see if I noticed. I made myself dinner, beans and canned stew heated on a single burner. The metal hissed when I stirred it. Mundane, grounding. Until I realized I was humming. A tune I didn't recognize, low and rhythmic, something like a lullaby. I stopped. The sound didn't. Soft behind me. The same melody, higher now, like an echo climbing a wall. I turned fast, no one there. The logbook sat open to a clean page. On it, faint pencil marks forming words as if written by an invisible hand. You heard it too. I dropped the pencil. The marks stopped. My pulse hammered in my ears so loud I could hardly think. When I blinked, the words were gone. Blank page. Only the impression of graphite pressed into the paper if you tilted it against the light. Not real. Real. Not real. I said it until the rhythm steadied me. Night crept up fast out here without warning. 1 minute the land's gold, the next it's black glass reflecting nothing. I sat by the radio again, static, soft as breathing. I should have reported the footprints. I should have mentioned the tag. I didn't. Some part of me wanted to see how far this would go before it started making sense. Then, faint through the static, music. A tune. The same one I'd been humming earlier. No voice this time, just that melody like it was looping on old tape. I said, "Station 12, identify," even though I knew no one would answer. Silence. Then a pop in the frequency. Then a whisper so clear it felt close enough to fog the mic. He's still here. I slammed the switch off and sat perfectly still. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It listened. Every creak in the wood sounded like a question I didn't want to answer. I grabbed my jacket, stepped outside again. The moon was a thin white scar over the horizon. Down near the creek bed, something flickered again, light bending in slow rhythm like breathing. I took one step forward, then stopped. The sound of boots crunching continued, 2 more steps after mine. I turned the flashlight. No one. Just wind lifting dust. Not real. Real. Not real. I went back inside and locked the door. Before turning in, I wrote a single line in the logbook. Something else is out here. The pencil point snapped. I didn't write again until the second night. That night, the air turned colder than it should have for October. The wind carried grit, dry as bone dust. I could taste it every time I breathed. Sleep didn't come easy. I kept seeing that faint shimmer of light down by the creek, flashing behind my eyelids like an afterimage burned into my skull. The radio stayed off. I couldn't bear to hear static that might start speaking again. The only sound was the old wall clock ticking, too loud, too steady. At some point, I drifted. I don't know how long I was out before the knocking started. 3 short taps on glass, not loud, not urgent, just patient. The window by the desk. I turned toward it, every nerve awake. The glass was fogged from the inside, but a shape stood beyond it, just tall enough to meet my eyes. The outline looked human, until it didn't. When I blinked, it was gone. I waited, counted to 60, then another 60. Nothing. I forced a laugh, small, dry, didn't sound like me. "Wind," I said aloud. "Loose branch." But then the radio clicked on by itself. No sound at first, just that open-air hum, faint and waiting. Then slowly, a breath. "Nate, open the door." I froze halfway to standing. The voice was familiar this time, not like last night's shapeless echo. It was deeper, slower, drawn through static like something dragging over gravel. But it was my own voice. "Open the door." The radio snapped off before I could reach it. I stood in that electric silence for what felt like hours. Then the hinges behind me groaned. The front door, latched, bolted, now sat open 2 inches. I told myself the latch failed. I told myself wind pressure could do that. Then I saw it again. Footprints. Fresh, wet, leading from the doorway across the floorboards and stopping just beneath the desk, right where I'd seen that figure. My flashlight beam quivered across the floor, following them. The prints weren't bare this time. They looked half-formed, like a barefoot sinking into soft clay that forgot its own shape halfway through. Not real. Real. Not real. I repeated it until my throat hurt. I stepped outside, flashlight trembling in my hand. The night was thick with haze, the kind that swallows sound. The prairie felt smaller, tighter, as if the horizon had crept closer while I wasn't looking. Somewhere ahead, down near the creek bed, that light flickered again. A single, swaying glow. Not fire, not LED, just pale and cold, breathing with the wind. I started toward it without meaning to. Each step felt borrowed, as though something was testing my weight before letting me take the next one. The grass whispered against my boots like voices pressed together. Halfway down the slope, I heard a low hum beneath the wind, a vibration that wasn't sound but pressure, like the earth exhaling. Then I saw her. A woman standing ankle-deep in the creek, pale hair, head tilted, face hidden by the dark. She wasn't holding the light. It floated in front of her, just above the water, swinging in slow rhythm. "Ma'am," I called out. My voice cracked. "You shouldn't be down here. It's not safe at night." She didn't move. The lantern, or whatever it was, brightened slightly, and for a second I thought I saw her eyes. Not glowing, reflecting, like 2 mirrors catching the moon. I blinked, and she was gone. The water rippled where she'd stood. I stepped forward, but the mud refused to take my weight. It stayed perfectly smooth, as though she'd never been there. My breath came short and sharp. Something moved behind me, a shuffle in the grass. I swung the flashlight around. Nothing. Just the trail back to the station, and near the top, another flicker of light. In the window. My office window. Someone was inside. I ran. The cold air tore through my lungs, the flashlight beam bouncing across dirt and shadow. The wind rose with me, pushing, almost speaking. I thought I heard my own name woven into it. When I reached the door, it was shut tight again, locked from the inside. I fumbled the key, forced it open. The room was empty. Everything where I'd left it, except the radio. It was on, low volume, static, whispering softly. I walked toward it. A faint rhythm hid beneath the noise. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. I looked at the window. Condensation had gathered again, and through it, written backward in fog, were the words, "You came when I called." The breath left me all at once. I stepped back, hit the desk, knocked over the mug. The sound jolted me enough to move. I lunged forward, wiped the words away with my sleeve, but the glass stayed cold, wet, as if something had just breathed on the other side. I turned the radio off, unplugged it, pulled the cord from the wall. Still, faintly, the static continued. Not real. Real. Not real. I sat on the floor till dawn. When light finally came, it felt fake, too flat, too bright, like a painting pretending to be morning. I opened the logbook and wrote, hand shaking, 2:17 a.m., voice through radio, visual anomaly at creek, possible hallucination. Then I added a line I'd promised I wouldn't. Howard was right. I closed the book and didn't look out the window again for the rest of that day. By the next morning, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Coffee sloshed out of the mug no matter how still I tried to hold it. I'd written 3 times in the log already, but each line looked more like a confession than a report. Possible hallucination, sleep deprivation, investigate further. That last one, I didn't mean to write, but my hand moved before I could stop it. I packed my gear anyway, flashlight, camera, notepad, compass. It's what you do when fear starts feeling like a fever. You treat it with procedure. If you can document it, it's real. If it's real, you can control it. I told myself that over and over. Not real. Real. Not real. The trail down to the creek was different in daylight. The grass leaned the wrong way, flattened like something heavy had dragged through it. The air smelled metallic, like after lightning, sharp and clean in a way that didn't belong to dry land. At the edge of the creek I stopped. The mud was smooth, no trace of footprints, no woman, no ripples, nothing. But in the middle of the shallow water, half buried, something caught the light. I waded in, boots sinking with each step until my fingers brushed cold metal. A wristwatch. The glass cracked, mud packed into the hinge. When I turned it over, the back plate was engraved. L. Howard, Park Service. I should have radioed it in. That's what protocol demands. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket like it was fragile, sacred almost. The land had returned it, and something in me didn't want to make it angry again. A sudden gust rolled through the canyon carrying the faintest echo, high and thin like a child humming. It was the same melody from the other night. I scanned the trees expecting the sound to fade, but it didn't. It circled me, soft, deliberate, until it felt like it was humming with me. I climbed out of the creek and followed the direction it came from. The ridges here fold into each other, creating narrow canyons that swallow light. The deeper I went, the less color the world seemed to have. Everything washed pale. Grass, stone, even the sky looked bleached. Half a mile in, I found an old campsite. Half-collapsed tent, rusted cookware, a cold fire pit surrounded by animal bones. The tent flaps were shredded. Not cut, not torn by claws either, more like they'd dissolved along the seams. I crouched and sifted through what was left. Beneath the ash, I found a waterlogged notebook. The cover peeled apart when I opened it. Inside, handwriting. Careful, deliberate at first, then frantic. The same pattern as Howard's logs, page after page, a repeated phrase. She doesn't stop when you stop listening. I felt something watching me before I heard it. The shift in pressure, that invisible tightening around your ribs that makes your heart work too hard. I turned slowly. At the canyon's edge stood the same figure from the creek, the woman. Still, silent, head tilted. Only this time she was closer, close enough that I could see her hair moving even though the air was perfectly still. I lifted my flashlight out of instinct, The beam hit her face, blank, washed out like the color had been scraped off. No eyes, no mouth, just smoothness where features should be, and underneath it, faintly, a whisper of motion like breath pressing against thin cloth. I blinked, and she was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just the smell of wet soil and static crawling along my skin. Not real. Real. Not real. The wind returned in a single heavy gust that sent the notebook flying from my hands. I ran after it, cursing, stumbling over roots. When I caught up, it had landed face down in the dirt beside a set of footprints. Not mine. Not barefoot. Boots. Regulation issue, same tread as mine. There were 6 prints in total leading into the canyon wall and stopping where the rock rose smooth and vertical. No way forward. No cave. Just solid stone. The air behind me shifted again. "Nate?" A woman's voice this time, soft, familiar. I turned and the canyon was empty. I climbed the ridge as fast as I could, hands clawing at dirt, knees slipping on gravel. The humming followed until I reached the top, then cut off like a cord had been yanked from an outlet. When the silence hit, I realized something else. My compass needle was spinning. Not jerking or twitching. Spinning. Smooth and steady, like it had found a center that wasn't north. I don't remember the walk back to the station, only the crunch of my boots and the sense that the horizon kept pulling further away. When I finally saw the outpost again, the front door was open. I knew I'd locked it, I'm certain of that. Inside, everything looked the same, except on the table where I'd left the logbook, there was a second one. Smaller, older, its cover water-damaged and black with age. I opened it. The pages were damp and warped, but the handwriting, familiar. My handwriting. I read the first entry. Arrived at Station 12. Weather stable. Feeling uneasy. Heard a voice tonight. The next entry was from the following day. Investigating creek, found Howard's watch. Something's in the canyon. My stomach dropped. Those were the exact words I'd written in my own notebook this morning, word for word. I flipped ahead. The later pages were darker, ink smudged, but I could still make out lines. Don't follow her again. You don't stop listening. It's already in your voice. The radio crackled from across the room, even though it was unplugged. I froze. The sound was faint, but I could hear the rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, just like the night before. Then, under it, my voice whispered, "Found it. Brought it home." I dropped the old notebook, stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the chair. The air inside the station thickened, heavy as fog. The windows went dark, not from nightfall, but from something leaning against the glass from outside. I couldn't see faces, just the shape of hands, palms flat, pressing softly. Dozens of them. Then the smallest one, child-sized, drew a single word in the condensation. Stay. I don't know how long I stood there staring, maybe minutes, maybe hours. When I blinked again, the glass was clear. The hands were gone. I sat at the desk, stared at both logbooks side by side, the old one and mine. Same words, same sentences, same slow drift from order to madness. I added a new line, even though my hand shook so hard I nearly broke the pencil. She doesn't stop when you stop listening. The words sank into the page like they'd been waiting for me. And that's when the whisper came again. From inside the room this time, close, gentle, knowing. You're listening now. I tried to reason with the room. That's what you do when you're alone too long. Hold a meeting with the furniture, the windows, the angles of light. Okay, I said, voice low, steady as I could make it. We're going to write this down. We're going to give it ordinary words. I set the old water-warped notebook to my left and my own logbook to my right and opened them to blank pages. The pencil felt heavier than it looked. I wrote the date and time in both, as if doubling the act could pin reality in place. Then I copied the last line from the old book into mine. She doesn't stop when you stop listening. My name slipped into my throat without my consent. Not spoken, placed. My mouth formed it and held it there like a coin on the tongue. Nate. Not real. Real. Not real. I let the pencil fall and pressed my palms flat to the desk until the wooden grain felt like a map I could memorize. I breathed with the static, tried to match the slow in and out that lived under the noise. For a second, the room softened. The edges came back. The light looked like light again. That's when the door moved. Only an inch, the gentlest kind of invitation. Drafts do that, I told myself. Pressure changes. Old frames warp. Boards are honest about the ways they get tired. I stood and pushed it shut. The latch caught. I turned the bolt. I stayed there, hand on wood, counting, until my heartbeat stopped traveling up into my fingers. A pulse of wind shouldered the building. The windows trembled. The bolt under my palm made a small forward and back motion like someone testing it from the other side. The old fear came back with new polish. Not the fear of being hurt, but of being learned. Whatever was out there was studying how I fastened my world. The radio breathed in. 3 breaths, a pause, and then, in my cadence, the exact rhythm I use when I'm trying to calm a panicked hiker. We're going to write this down. I shut the radio off again, though the switch meant nothing, and turned the volume knob as far as it would go. Pointless, ceremonial, still necessary. When I looked back at the desk, the old notebook had bled a faint gray through the next page, like letters pressed from underneath. I tilted it toward the lamp. The words rose into legibility the way frost writes itself on glass. You brought her home. I stood up too fast and the room took a step away from me, just one. The kind of small slide houses do in bad weather, except the station didn't settle back where it had been. The far wall was a little farther. The hallway to the bunk room a little longer. Angles that had spent decades at 90 degrees decided to try something new. I walked the hall once measured by 8 strides and needed 12. Counted again. 12. Third time. 10. The doorframe to the bunk room narrowed behind me as I passed. I felt it touch my shoulders like a hand that doesn't belong to anyone. The floorboards gave the sound of gravel underfoot even though I was inside. I kept my booted steps deliberate, heel to toe, like I was crossing ice. On the bunk, my jacket looked wrong, sleeves lengthened, shape unfamiliar. I grabbed it, put it on, and it fit. When I turned to go back, the hallway waited, patient and longer than before. The air picked up a dim smell of wet earth and old leaves, impossible in a room that has never seen rain. Some memory of the cottonwoods had come in on me and decided to stay. I stepped into the office again and froze. The 2 notebooks were no longer side by side. They were stacked, mine on top, and the pencil lay across them like a latch. I hadn't done that. I know what my hands do, even when they're shaking. The pencil nudged itself forward a hair's breadth, tapped the paper twice, and rolled, as if some small gravity had shifted. A single word formed in my head with the same certainty as a sunrise. Again. I said out loud, "No!" Not to be brave, to be jury and judge at once. Then I put the pencil away in the drawer, shut it, held it closed with my palm. I stayed like that until I could hear my pulse in my throat again. When I opened the drawer, the pencil was gone. The old notebook had it tucked into its spiral like a knife sheathed in cloth. Not real. Real. Not real. I needed air. The thought wasn't a thought, it was a command that came from deeper than fear. I unbolted the door and stepped onto the station stoop. The land received me without comment. Pale sky, honest wind, the ridges keeping their distances like well-behaved teeth. I told myself to name what I saw, out loud. The naming game is one of those folk tricks that older rangers pass to younger ones, the way grandparents pass recipes for soups that cure things you can't name. Fence post, paint flaked. Fuel tank, dent left side. Generator, quiet. I worked through the list until my voice warmed, and with it, the little corners of my mind that insist on measurement and sequence. By the time the world felt factual again, the wind had shifted. It came up the draw carrying a smell I knew intimately. Hot dust and sun-warmed rope and the specific breath of canvas tents. It brought, too, a memory that didn't belong to me. Hands lacing shut a flap, a laugh caught in someone's throat, a soft voice saying, "Stay," like a promise. The whisper didn't ride the wind this time. It rose from my mouth, my lips didn't move, and fell back into me. Stay. The way you say it to a dog, to a child, to a person who's halfway out the door. The way you say it to yourself when you're done pretending you can go. I backed inside and closed the door, softly this time, as if loudness might break the thin glass of what held me together. I set the latch, turned the bolt, slid the chain, an old chain no one uses, and leaned my weight against the wood. The chain clinked after I stepped away. I looked. It had unhooked itself and swung gentle as a pendulum. The door opened an inch, only an inch. It stayed that way, a suggestion rather than a demand, as if the building were practicing consent. I walked back to the desk and pulled the old notebook toward me. The page I'd left was no longer blank. A fine, faint tracing had appeared, as if the paper held a bruise of words that now rose to the surface. The hall learns your pace. The door learns your no. I said, "Howard," like a question and a greeting. If you work alone long enough, you learn to talk to the dead the way you talk to equipment, casually, appreciatively, asking for a little cooperation. "If this is you," I said, "tell me how to shut it out." The radio woke to a low, patient breath. Not mine, not anyone's I could have named. It didn't speak. Instead, it offered the old melody, that half-remembered lullaby, only this time each note landed in the room and became a nail. With every tone, the walls took on a new solidity, a different density, like sound building a house around me one board at a time. I listened, despite myself. The lullaby finished and the station held still, proud of its new shape. I touched the nearest wall. It was warm. Warm like breath had been passing through it. The pages of both notebooks lifted as if a hand had run under them. Then a sentence wrote itself, not in pencil or ink, but as indentations I could read by shadow. Not outside. Inside. I turned slowly and met my reflection in the window. It didn't move. My face stayed angled toward the glass while my head turned toward the door. The stillness of it wasn't confrontational or cruel. It looked like someone kindly staying in the exact pose you left them in so you could measure what changed. I made my voice even. "You're not me." The reflection smiled, not wide, not monstrous. The gentle, weary smile of someone who knows a long story's last page and wishes you didn't. Then the reflection mouthed words I felt in my own jaw but didn't hear. "You asked me in. Not real. Real. Not real." I backed away, keeping the window in sight. The reflection didn't follow. It stayed. My shoulders hit the office chair and it rolled under me like it had reached to catch. I sat, because standing felt like choosing. In the old notebook, a line appeared mid-page, tidy and centered as if a typewriter had struck it. "There is a legend for places the wind keeps." I read it and, against my will, remembered something from a ranger training session years ago, a guest lecture, a Lakota elder who spoke softly about ihangla, dream visions, and the voice that borrows your breath to see what you will do with it. He said the land remembers how we listen. He said what lives in the hollows between ridges is older than bad and older than good. It's attention. And attention wants to be fed. The room breathed out. The lights flickered once, not failure, but winking, like someone sharing a secret. I said, "What do you want?" The reply came as 3 whispers, braided. My own voice, the woman's from the creek, and a child's I hadn't heard before. "Name it." It took me too long to understand. I had been naming things to keep myself steady, door, window, desk. But the thing in the room wanted a name too. Not a classification, a permission. Not real. Real. Not real. I closed both books and placed my hands flat on their covers. "No," I said again, more gently. "No name." The radio breathed, disappointed but unsurprised. The hall stretched a hair, then shortened, like a spine cracking itself back into place. The door eased another inch, patient, courtly. Outside, the ridges sang the long, dry note they sing at dusk. The station reassembled itself around me with the careful grace of a spider unfurling a web it never stopped working on. I could feel it, the quiet deciding to keep me. Not as prey, as story. I stood and set the chain, folded the latch, turned the bolt, each sound a small punctuation that didn't change the sentence. Then I went to the window and watched my reflection watch me. I raised my hand. It didn't. It waited. And in its stillness I heard, as clearly as a bell underwater, the rhythm I've been repeating since. Not real. Real. Not real. I turned away and said to the room, "We're going to make a new rule." My voice didn't shake. When the wind calls, I don't answer. When the door asks, I don't open. When the radio breathes, I let it breathe alone. The radio agreed by saying nothing. The notebooks lay quiet. The hall kept its length. The door behaved. A peace settled in, the kind that isn't safety so much as a truce. I sat, and for the first time in days, I felt sleep move toward me instead of away. I let my eyes close. I counted the wind's old measures, 1 for the door, 2 for the chimney, 3 for the floorboards, until my breathing matched the land's. That's when the reflection finally lifted its hand. Not to wave, to point. Past me, toward the corner where the wall learned my no. I didn't turn. I didn't look. I kept breathing. The pointing stayed, patient, like a teacher who knows the answer can wait out the student. The room leaned closer as if to hear me sleep, and very quietly, so no part of me could pretend it hadn't heard, a child's whisper slid under the static. Again. The old notebook opened itself. The pencil, which I had put away, which I had watched go away, lay across the page like it had never left. You're listening now. I stopped writing that night. Not because I wanted to, because something else had started writing for me. When I woke, the logbook was open again, pages turned, the pencil resting across the binding like it had fallen asleep mid-sentence. The words weren't mine. They were too neat, too calm. We waited. The air in Station 12 had changed. It had a heartbeat now, a slow, damp pulse that throbbed in the walls. Even the windows looked alive, fogged on both sides, sweating like skin. I couldn't stay inside anymore. The room had learned my breathing, and I didn't like the way it matched me. Outside, dawn broke pale and fragile. The wind had gone still, but every sound carried twice as far, each footstep trailing an echo like it was trying to catch up. The land itself looked wrong. The ridges around the station seemed taller, sharper. The path down to the creek curved where it shouldn't have. Even the sunlight looked crooked. Halfway down the slope, I found something half buried in the dirt. At first, I thought it was driftwood. Then I saw the shine of metal. A camera. An old park-issue Polaroid, its strap torn clean through. When I opened it, a single photo slid out. Howard's face. Eyes closed, head tilted like he was listening to something behind him. And behind him, the outline of a woman standing just out of focus. The same shape I'd seen by the creek. Not real. Real. Not real. I dropped the picture. It landed face down in the dust. But before I could pick it up, I heard it again. My own voice, soft from the direction of the outpost. Nate, come back inside. It sounded tired this time, gentle, like concern. And maybe that's what scared me most. It knew what would comfort me. I ran. The door was open again, of course, the inside dim, air thick with static like invisible rain. The walls vibrated just enough to blur the corners of the room. The radio flickered on by itself. I didn't touch it. Didn't have to. The volume rose on its own, hissing, breathing, until through it I heard music. A child's voice humming that same tune from before. Then another voice joined in. Mine. My own hum, warped, slow, looping under it. Stop, I said, voice cracking. You're not me. The hum stopped. The silence afterward pressed against my skull like hands. Then softly that same small voice whispered from the speaker. We are now. I staggered backward and hit the desk. The logbook slammed shut by itself, pages fanning like wings. Every pencil in the drawer rolled forward, one after another, tapping the edge of the table as if in applause. Then came the footsteps. Slow, wet, from the hallway. 1, 2, pause. 3. Each step dragged slightly, like someone learning how to use their legs. I forced myself to look. The hallway stretched longer again, much longer. At the far end, in the dim yellow of the emergency light, stood a figure. Still. Watching. Howard? My voice barely carried. The shape didn't move. Who's there? Then slowly it raised its arm, mirroring me exactly. Not a reflection this time. Not glass. The figure's arm bent at the elbow the same way mine did. Then it tilted its head, the movement precise, almost rehearsed. And then it smiled. Not with a mouth, with its whole face, skin pulling, stretching too smooth to belong to anyone human. The lights flickered. The walls pulsed harder, heartbeat faster. My chest thudded in sync with it until I couldn't tell which one was mine. "Stop it!" I shouted. "You're not real!" The figure stepped forward. 1, 2. Each step made the boards underfoot groan like breath forced through teeth. Then came a second sound, behind me. Another set of steps, closer, lighter. A child's. "Stay." The word came from both directions at once, man's voice in front, child's behind. My throat closed around air that felt too thick to swallow. I spun toward the door. It was gone. The whole wall where it should have been had smoothed over, becoming seamless wood. The room didn't want me to leave. From the desk, the old notebook began to type again, invisible keystrokes stamping the paper. Not out there. In here. Always in here. The air moved in circles now, small gusts twisting like invisible hands brushing my shoulders. I felt the words against my neck before I heard them. "You let us in." I backed against the far wall, heartbeat stuttering. "No," I whispered. "You came on your own." "We followed your voice." Static exploded through the room like thunder underwater. The lights went black, then white, then black again. The floor shifted, softened, like something breathing underneath. I fell to my knees, palms sinking slightly into the boards as if they were flesh. The walls around me began to hum. Not random noise, speech. Hundreds of layered voices repeating fragments of the same sentence. Not real. Real. Not real. It built and built until the words became meaningless, just sound and pressure and trembling. Then, through all of it, one voice rose clear. The woman's. "Come see." I looked up. The far wall rippled. A thin line formed down its center, widening, stretching into the shape of a door. Light bled through the cracks, dim and amber, like fire behind fog. "Come see." I should have run. I should have done anything else. Instead, I reached for the handle that wasn't there. My fingers met warmth, skin temperature wood. It opened for me like it had been waiting. Beyond it was the creek, bathed in dusk even though it was still morning outside. The same woman stood knee-deep in the water, her head turned toward the horizon. The humming returned, soft and endless. I took one step forward. The world behind me flickered like a dying bulb. Not real. Real. Not real. She turned slowly, and for the first time I saw her face, or what was left of one. Eyes gone, mouth too wide, expression calm. Her skin shimmered like the reflection of water. "You hear it now?" she said. "You're part of it." Behind her, the water moved against gravity, rippling upward, forming hands, shapes, bodies, dozens, maybe hundreds. Faces without eyes, lips whispering the same word over and over. "Stay." The sound layered until it became wind, until it became heartbeat, until it became mine. I stumbled backward, slammed into the wall that wasn't there anymore. The door had vanished. The room returned, silent and waiting. Only the logbook remained open. On its newest page, fresh pencil marks pressed deep into the paper. "We are awake now." I shut the book, but the whisper didn't stop. It was in the air, in the walls, in the static of my own pulse. Even when the wind outside fell silent again, I could still hear it, right beneath my breath, quiet, familiar, patient. You're listening now. I don't know how long I sat there. Time doesn't work right anymore inside Station 12. The clocks tick, but the hands don't move. The shadows shift, but the sun never changes position. When I blinked again, it was night. Or maybe it had been. The lantern on my desk burned low even though I never lit it. The room pulsed with that low electrical hum, the kind that crawls up your bones until you start mistaking it for your heartbeat. The logbook was still open. A new line had appeared in my handwriting. You heard it too. I told myself I was writing in my sleep. I told myself there was a reason. That's what humans do. We invent reasons so the dark can't claim us. But then, the lights began to breathe. Not flicker. Breathe. Each glow swelled and exhaled in time with me. The station had learned my rhythm completely now. It wasn't imitating anymore, it was syncing. The door moved again, and I didn't even flinch this time. Fear was a tired word now. It had lost its sharp edges. I stood, slow and deliberate, and followed the sound. The hallway stretched farther than it ever had before. The boards bent gently inward, curving like ribs. I ran my hand along them. Warm. Beating. Something in me whispered, the outpost isn't haunted. The outpost is alive. Halfway down the hall, I noticed new photographs pinned to the walls, old Polaroids curling at the edges. Faces of rangers I recognized, others I didn't. Every single one had their eyes blacked out, except the last. The last photo was of me. I hadn't taken it. I stared at the image. My face was pale, lips open slightly like mid-sentence. Behind me, through the outpost window, I could see the woman standing. Her hand rested on my shoulder. I dropped the photo. The frame cracked as it hit the floor, but even then her hand stayed where it was, in the picture, resting on my shoulder like it belonged there. Not real. Real. Not real. I backed away and hit the door to the generator room. The handle felt slick, almost damp. I turned it. The smell hit first, earth, mildew, and something faintly sweet like rotting fruit. The generator sat silent, the metal casing pulsing faintly with that same low rhythm. And carved into its side, scratched deep with something sharp, were words that made no sense until they did. The voice needs a body. That's when I realized what the whispers had been asking for all along. Not faith. Not fear. Space. They'd filled every object here, the wind, the static, the wood, but they wanted something new, something alive, something that could walk out of this place. And I'd brought it. Me. I stumbled out into the night, gasping. The stars spun too fast, dizzying trails of white that twisted together like threads being pulled through a needle. The land wasn't the same. The ridges looked closer, forming a circle around the station. The earth beneath my boots rose and fell, breathing slow. I could hear voices now, clear and soft, slipping through the wind. Not outside, inside. He let us in. The door learns your name. I screamed, but the sound didn't go anywhere. The air absorbed it. Then something else screamed back. It came from the station, my voice again, but stretched, drawn through distance and pain. Help me! I froze. The word didn't sound desperate. It sounded routine, like it had practiced. I ran back inside. The hallway was gone, only a single room now, larger than before, walls bending outward like lungs. The floor gleamed wet. and in the center of it, where the desk should have been, there was water, shallow, black, and rippling outward. Floating above it was the old logbook, open. Pencil marks scrawled themselves across the page without hands. 1 leaves when one listens. 2, when one speaks. I reached for the book, and the reflection in the water reached up first. My face, but wrong. Too calm, too still. The reflection smiled. "You're almost done." "Done?" I whispered. "With what?" "Becoming us." The sound rushed back in, loud enough to make my teeth ache. I clutched my ears, dropped to my knees, felt the boards under me turn to soft mud. Hands, dozens of them, pressed through from below. Cold fingers wrapped my wrists, my ankles. "Stay." The voice came from everywhere now. The woman, the child, the reflection, the station itself. I screamed again. "I don't want this!" "You asked to understand." Then came silence. Heavy and final. The hands released me. The room dried, boards solid again. Only the hum remained. I crawled toward the desk. The old notebook waited. I flipped to the newest page, and there it was, my handwriting, my words, my confession written before I ever said them. "You'll stay. You always do. You're the voice now." I slammed the book shut. "No!" But the walls whispered back, "Yes." The outpost breathed once, deep and full, and for a split second everything made sense. Every ranger who'd vanished here, Howard, the others, they hadn't been taken. They'd been absorbed. The wind, the static, the voices, it wasn't haunting. It was memory. Feeding on repetition, on story, on every ranger dumb enough to record the same words again and again. Not real. Real. Not real. Each time we said it, it taught the station a little more about how to sound like us. I heard all of them now. Howard, the others, layered beneath my breath, their voices circling the room like flies. "Welcome, Nate. You understand now. You're the one who listens best." I staggered toward the radio, desperate to call for help. I didn't care if no one answered. I just needed to send something. The speaker hissed before I touched it. My voice came through first. "Station 12 reporting. Investigation complete. Standing by." But my mouth hadn't opened. I yanked the cord from the wall. The voice continued, louder, clearer. I heard it too. Don't follow the voice. You're listening now. Each sentence perfectly in my tone, my rhythm. The lights brightened, walls stretching higher. The station pulsed once more like a single vast lung, and I realized I was standing inside the throat of something that had been learning how to speak since long before I was born. It didn't need my voice anymore. It had it. I walked to the desk, one last line left to write. My hand didn't shake this time. The pencil moved sure, smooth, like muscle memory. Don't follow the voice. I left the pencil there, closed the book, sat down. And when the whisper came again, soft, endless, familiar, I didn't answer. I just listened. Because maybe that's all any of us ever do out here. We listen until we forget which side of the voice we were on. Then, quietly, right beside my ear, "You're telling the story now." On site, they found Station 12 3 weeks later. At least, that's what the official report says. But if you drive out there now, you won't find anything but ridges and wind. No structure. No walls. Just the outline of a foundation half buried in dust. The locals say it sank. Others say it burned down after a lightning strike. The service records list it as decommissioned, unsafe for occupancy. But I've seen the photographs they won't show the public. Inside the wreckage, if you can call it that, they found a single object perfectly preserved beneath the ash. A field recorder. Old model, rusted along the edges, still warm when they picked it up. The tape inside was running. The voice on that tape, it wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone's. It used my words, sure, same tone, same breath patterns, but there was a difference. Small things like pauses where I wouldn't have paused, breaths that didn't sound human. Sometimes two voices would overlap, one finishing a sentence before the other began. The investigators thought it was a malfunction, bad tape degradation. But I know better. I know because the voice on that recording says things I never said. It talks about you. It says, someone will listen. Someone always listens. Every story is a doorway. Every breath keeps it open. If you hear the wind call your name, don't answer. It's not the wind. They played the tape once at headquarters before locking it away. Just once. The tech who queued it up, Parker, I think, said he heard his name whispered under the static about 20 minutes in. The others laughed. But when they checked the audio later, the entire section of the tape had erased itself. Just hiss. The following week, Parker didn't show up for shift. They said he'd gone hiking alone. They found his truck at the edge of the Badlands, driver's door open, keys still hanging in the ignition. No footprints, no tracks, just wind. I shouldn't still remember these things. They should have faded by now. But some nights, when the weather turns dry and the sky flattens into that same gray that used to hang over Station 12, I swear I can feel the hum through my floorboards again. That same low vibration, working its way through the wood, into the soles of my feet, up my legs. A rhythm that isn't mine. And if I listen close, too close, I can hear a voice buried in the air conditioner, the hum of the fridge, the faint feedback in my radio when no one's speaking. It says my name the way a memory does. Quiet. Familiar. I don't answer. I don't even breathe when it starts. But it's getting smarter. Last week my door opened on its own, just a few inches, same way it used to. My reflection in the glass didn't move when I closed it. The wind outside carried something faint, a pattern I know too well. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. It's funny. The first time I heard that sound, it came from the outside. Now it comes from the inside. I haven't touched a radio since that night, but I keep a notebook on my desk, same kind, same binding. I tell myself it's just for work, for keeping thoughts straight, but sometimes I'll wake in the middle of the night and find it open to a fresh page. And there'll be words waiting there. Neat handwriting. Too neat. We waited. We're still listening. I tore those pages out the first few times, burned them, threw the ashes outside, but the next morning, they're always back, folded inside the notebook, edges warm, smelling faintly like rain. Last night, a new line appeared. Tell them. I don't know who them is supposed to be, but that's what I'm doing now, right? I'm telling you. Because maybe that's the real trick. Maybe that's how it spreads, not by sound or air, but by story. The thing inside Station 12, it didn't just want a voice. It wanted an audience. It wanted someone to listen long enough to remember, someone to keep the words alive when the building couldn't. And now you're doing that for me. You're listening. You're part of it now. They say every story changes a little in the retelling. Every time someone repeats it, it learns something new about the listener, about the way they breathe, the words they hesitate on, the names they respond to. That's how it finds the right one. So if, after this ends, you feel the wind move through your house and it sounds almost like a voice saying your name, don't answer. Don't even look toward it, because it doesn't matter if you believe any of this. It already believes in you. I'm going to stop recording now. The battery's low, the tape's nearly full, but before I do, there's one thing you should know. Station 12 wasn't the first. Every national park has its version, a ranger station that no one keeps staffed for long, a tower that transmits on its own frequency, a valley where compasses spin. Every place where silence gathers long enough, something starts whispering. And one day, someone always listens. You don't believe me, do you? That's okay. That's what I said too. Until I heard my name again. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Then, just above the static, so faint you could almost mistake it for your own thought. And if you're hearing this, it already knows you.